man with a .45 meets a man with a rifle, you said the man with a pistol's a dead man. Let's see if that's true.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Unpopular Opinion. And guys, today it is April 15th, 2025. It is the 113th year anniversary of the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Guys, you know me, I'm a massive history geek, and I really love the sinking of the Titanic. Actually, that sounds really weird, but let me rephrase it as I am very fascinated with the Titanic, and that is what got me interested in history in the first place. So, guys, today I am going to be reviewing and comparing and analyzing the two most iconic Titanic movies. Today, we are going to see which is the best Titanic film. Is it James Cameron's Titanic from 1997, or is it A Night to Remember from 1958? Guys, we are going to be doing a deep dive and analyzing certain aspects of the film. Normally, what I do is a 10-round winner-take-all, but in this circumstance, I'm actually only going to be doing 4 rounds to see which is superior, because being that the movie chronicles the same event from, I guess, different perspectives or different angles, I'm just narrowing down everything into what was overall best.
Sure. Count me in.
So the rounds are going to be overall what had the better performances, what had the better special effects, what was more historically accurate, and which has the longer legacy or greater legacy. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this. So A Night to Remember, it's a 1958 movie, and it was adapted from the book by Walter Lord, A Night to Remember. The movie is supposed to be a historical film. It's not really a dramatized version of what happened. It is based on historical accounts, documents, records, the official inquiries by both the United States and the British authorities, and it's also based off of eyewitness testimony, because Walter Lord put a lot of effort into writing the book, and then when the movie adapted it, it pretty much just transitioned everything from page to screen.
This ship is going to founder. But she can't.
Now that's a very important distinction, because Titanic is supposed to be a historical fiction.
You know, I do believe this ship may sink.
And the sinking of the Titanic is a real life thing, but that is kind of second banana to the fictional plot with the fictional characters. So the characters in Titanic, some of them are fiction, and I actually did a video not too long ago criticizing Titanic's supposed love story. That's going to be linked below. It's actually right here if you want to go check it out. It's pretty cool. I think you're going to enjoy that video, but the best way to describe Titanic is its flawed characters in a real life tragedy. So the first round, we're going to be analyzing what movie had the better performances. Okay, so let's start with Titanic. Titanic was nominated for 2 Oscars for the performance categories. So Kate Winslet was the star of the movie. She was nominated for Best Actress. And then the older lady who played Rose, she was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress. So the 2 Roses were nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Leonardo DiCaprio, fantastic actor. He's in the movie. He did a very good job. Billy Zane, he plays Cal, who is the supposed villain, but we're not supposed to like the guy. He is unlikable. And Billy Zane played him so well that he does his job pretty good. I mean, well, overall, the actors who played the historical figures did a splendid job, in my opinion. I mean, King Theoden played Captain Edward J. Smith, which is really a treat. This guy's like got a distinction of being in the 2 movies that won the most Oscars, Titanic and Lord of the Rings 3. But he did a solid job portraying Captain Smith.
Says they can be here in 4 hours. 4 hours?
Victor Garber in the role of Thomas Andrews, the architect, the engineer, the designer, the builder of the Titanic. Stellar job.
But this ship can't sink.
She's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can. And she will. It is a mathematical certainty.
You know, Jonathan Hyde, Kathy Bates, they all did a really good job. So overall, I would say that Titanic, it's got a solid cast and a lot of good actors who portrayed the parts very well. And even though the fictional characters are at the forefront of the movie more than the historical ones, the people who did play the historical actors did do a good job.
The money can't save you any more than it could save me. Get back!
So on the other hand, for A Night to Remember, we have Kenneth More. He plays the lead in the movie. He is Second Officer Charles Lightoller.
Wouldn't you feel worried about betting on a certainty?
Pretty much the main actors are all British, all English, and I just happen to think that British people are better actors. It's in their blood to be superior at what they do. The way that English people can dictate words and speak, it's just brilliant.
It's a mathematical certainty. With that amount of underwater damage, she can't stay afloat.
I look at the movie and it's hard to pick bad performances out. None of the performances are bad. They're actually pretty good. To my utter surprise, I happen to think that even if it comes off as a little too professional or Shakespearean, what was going on in A Night to Remember actually had me more emotionally invested because the merits of their performances. You can actually see the tragedy unfolding. I mean, Kenneth More in the role of Lightoller not only had us riveted as this guy's the man, he's our main character, but also also there are scenes where he's involved where the characters are recognizing the tragedy that's unfolding.
Goodbye, my dear son.
Come on, son.
A lot of the supporting actors who played the passengers really made me feel for them. So, as crazy as it might sound, I'm giving this round to A Night to Remember. Winner, A Night to Remember. All right, for round 2, we have special effects. Now, guys, A Night to Remember came out in the 1950s, late 1950s, and to my surprise, when I watched it, special effects were actually pretty good. I'm not gonna lie, the special effects were very surprising in how good they looked. I mean, you can obviously tell there are a lot of miniatures and a lot of models and sets that were used, but that doesn't diminish the fact that it still did its job. So the iceberg, I said this in my A Night to Remember review, the iceberg that was shown in the movie looked a lot like what the iceberg or the alleged iceberg that sunk the Titanic looked like. The model pretty much captured what the Titanic looked like. I really liked the sinking sequences, and I actually really thought it was cool and impressive how in the 1950s there were shots where passengers were pulling away from the boat, and you could see it's obviously like a green screen, but it still doesn't look that bad. I'm very impressed by it. So when the ship was going down and the bubbles were coming out, solid stuff. But guys, flattery is not really going to get this movie very far because we're going to be talking about Titanic, 1997, James Cameron. James Cameron is known for directing films with big budget special effects and CGI, like The Terminator, Avatar, and obviously Titanic. People might hate the movie, but you really can't downplay the effort that went into portraying the Titanic. Like, they built the set of the Titanic by recreating the Titanic. They built all these really detailed models and miniatures, and then they used a combination of practical special effects and CGI special effects to really make you're transported back to that night. It really does look realistic. I don't dislike black and white films. That doesn't bother me, but the fact is there is a lot more color in the movie. And when you have color films, you could play with it a little bit and it manipulates the audience to feeling a certain way. So when they're in the water or the sinking sequences are going down and you see this bluish tint, it gives us the impression that it's cold out.
It's just gonna take them a couple of minutes to get the boat's organized.
Which is a subtle thing, but it's the devil's in the detail, which A Night to Remember couldn't do. And then Not for Not, you have the amazing sinking CGI where you're actually able to do in-depth shots of the ship breaking apart or going down to the last moment. I just think it can't be understated or underappreciated or downplayed how incredible the special effects were and the effort that went into building the set for Titanic was. So, winner, Titanic. All right, my fellow Titanic geeks, now we're getting to the part where everyone wants to talk about. Guys, we're talking about the historical accuracy of both of these movies. So, as I mentioned in the intro, A Night to Remember, it's an actual historical movie. The creators and the guy who wrote the original book, Walter Lord, they really did their research, they really did their homework, and they put a lot of effort to making this as historically accurate as possible. On the flip side of that, Titanic, James Cameron, it's a historical fiction.
She's a goddamn liar!
Now we're going to discuss what was historically accurate. We're not going to do a huge deep dive, but we're just going to do things that strike me personally and to most casual people, or even most Titanic buffs like myself. I would say there was a lot of creative liberties taken with the 1997 James Cameron version. Obviously because it's about fictional characters who are mingling or navigating a disaster that was a real life tragedy. Some things, some creative licenses were taken, but then there were other things that the movie did which was really wrong. Unfortunately, this movie falls into the trap of portraying certain stereotypes or cliches or myths or misconceptions about the Titanic. The two biggest ones would be about Bruce Ismay. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but the biggest one that Titanic did was how it portrayed First Officer William Murdoch.
Give us a chance to live, you limey bastard! I'll shoot any man who tries to get past me, get back!
So the thing about Titanic is it popularized the urban legend myth of First Officer William Murdoch shooting himself after killing a few passengers. Now, Now, there were eyewitness accounts and testimonies from passengers like George Reams or Eugene Daly where they said they saw an officer do this. Well, the thing is, it's not substantiated that First Officer Murdoch was the shooter. It's not substantiated that First Officer Murdoch did this. So being that this movie is so big and it's so popular that non-historians or casual movie-going audiences, they're gonna watch the movie, they're gonna know William Murdoch, and then this is how his legacy is portrayed. Which is actually very unfortunate because the man in real life saved a lot of people and he was a very brave, dedicated sailor. The movie makes him look really bad because not only does the scene in the movie that we're talking about now, he kills some passengers and then he kills himself, but it also shows him accepting bribes, which it's unfortunate, and it also really offended his family and living descendants. So in real life, First Officer William Murdoch was in charge of evacuating passengers from the starboard side, and he launched 10 lifeboats, and he was actually a lot more lenient as to who can actually get into the lifeboats. As seen in both movies, the infamous order that was given was women and children first. First Officer William Murdoch interpreted it as women and children first, but if there is room left in the boat and there are no more people left in the area, no more women and children in the area, then I'll allow men to get onto the boat. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, who was assisting and leading the evacuation on the port side, he interpreted as no men whatsoever, it's women and children only.
Wait a minute! He can't go, it's women and children only.
Therefore, Murdoch was responsible for saving more people than Lightoller. Now, another misconception that the movie plays upon is it makes Captain Smith kind of look indecisive and overwhelmed and panicked and not really giving orders during the sinking. The fact of the matter is, I mean, I know there was a deleted scene that kind of negates this, but it's not in the final movie. It makes him look really indecisive and panicked and not able to efficiently command people and help order his crew around, which is not a fair portrayal. There are a lot of conflicting accounts as to what he did in the final moments of the ship or how he went about and conducted himself during the sinking, but what is true to say, this is not really a fair portrayal of how the captain conducted himself while the ship was sinking. I think the thing that Titanic gets wrong, in my opinion, the most, this was really bad, is how poorly it portrayed J. Bruce Ismay. I went over this before, I've said this a few times. J. Bruce Ismay was the chairman of the White Star Line, and he's basically the ship's owner. Like, he was a high-ranking member of the White Star Line, high up in the company. So, being that he was the chairman, he was the owner of the Titanic, he would go on the ship's maiden voyages in his company, and the Titanic was no exception. So what ended up happening was, while the ship was sinking, he assisted people in the evacuation, he helped people into the lifeboats, he assisted the crew, and he chose to save himself, which was an extremely controversial decision, and it ruined his life. It actually, not only did he have survivor's guilt, but his decision to save himself, he was torn apart by the media. The media, the newspaper, society at large just tore him to shreds, and he was labeled as the coward of the Titanic rather unfairly. And then media, misconception, and myths label him as the villain of the Titanic because there's this, honestly, in my opinion, ridiculous notion that he pressured Captain Smith to go faster and to break some sort of speed record, which is not true. And there's a scene in the movie that shows this, falsely imprinting upon the viewers the impression that Ismay is some pompous, arrogant, mustachio businessman, capitalist, monopoly money guy who doesn't care about the crew and is willing to endanger people for the sake of the newspaper, which is completely not true.
We are making excellent time.
The Preston's the size of Titanic. Now I want them to marvel at her speed.
And the thing is, well, the movie, it doesn't really show his involvement in the evacuation that much. I will say, I'll give it credit that they portray him leaving the ship pretty accurately, because what happened in real life, the ship was going down. And while he was assisting with the evacuation on the starboard side, he was helping First Officer Murdoch, he got into collapsible lifeboat C at around 2 in the morning. At this point, Titanic really had like 20 minutes left to live, roughly speaking. The fact of the matter is, this was the last lifeboat to be successfully launched from the starboard side, meaning that Bruce Ismay didn't consider saving himself until the end. And it wasn't until the Titanic was about to go down that he chose to save himself.
Yes, spin.
And the movie, ironically, Titanic, I'm giving it credit, showed this correctly because you do see him ushering people into the boats. You see that William Murdoch is calling, is there anyone else? There's no more women and children in the area. We visually see that.
Any more women and children? All aboard, Mr. Murdoch. Anyone else then?
Anyone else who wants to get on the boat, who wants to get on the boat.
Come on, sir. Come on. Anyone else? Do hurry, hurry.
Protocol would allow for Ismay to climb into the boat, and he did. The unfortunate thing is that decision ruined his life, and it was very controversial.
Ready on the left.
But I do want to tell you a couple good things that Titanic did right. If you're a history geek like me, there are some eagle-eyed little things, Easter eggs that you can pluck out and be like, that is super cool. So there's a little cameo appearance from Chief Baker, Charles Jogan. You see him climbing over the starboard railing, taking a shot from his flask, which it is historical fact that the Chief Baker got really, really drunk. Much like how we see in this movie, he was the last guy to leave the Titanic because as the stern was going down, he stood on the outside of the rail and rode it into the water like it was an elevator. That was seen in the movie. That's true. We also see unsinkable Molly Brown, who was arguing with the sailor in his lifeboat and her lifeboat. They're arguing back and forth. That was a real thing. That really did happen. And the sailor's name was Robert Hitchens, and they actually really did have a quarrelsome back and forth battle. It was seen kind of minimal in the movie, like it wasn't shown in great detail, but in real life, Hitchens was belligerent, being very, very angry and hostile, didn't want to go back to pick up survivors, and Molly Brown and him were arguing. And then you also do see a male passenger in that boat. That's the only male passenger that Second Officer Charles Lightoller allowed into the water. His name was Arthur Godfrey Puchin, and what ended up happening was, as the boat was being lowered, there wasn't enough men in the boat to properly man the boat, to row the boat away from the ship. And so the women called back up to Lightoller, can you stop lowering the boat? We don't have enough men to properly sail this boat. And Puchin volunteered saying, I'm a yachtsman. I can do it if you'll allow me. And he was the only male passenger, adult male passenger, that Lightoller let into a lifeboat. And if you are like blink and you miss it, you can see him in the boat. Now, another thing I want to say about Titanic is this. We see guns on the ship, and there are multiple instances of guns being fired. Let's forget Officer Murdoch's scene with the gun. Let's just forget that for a moment. The fact is, there were guns allowed on the Titanic. Second Officer Charles Lightoller admitted that he had a gun, and there was a scene in the movie where he threatens people with an unloaded pistol.
Get back, I say, or I'll shoot you all like dogs.
He admitted that actually really did happen. You could read his testimony. He said he threatened some people with an unloaded pistol.
Down this boat. Right!
And then there were times where he fired his pistol into the air.
Women and children only!
That's all I'm on this boat!
There was also a scene where Fifth Officer Lowe was lowering in the lifeboat. He was going down, and a bunch of Italians were trying to jump into the boat, and he takes his pistol and he fires down the ship to scare them off.
Stay back!
According to him, that really did happen. Now, this is a tiny little nitpick, which doesn't affect anything, but I do want to share it. So in the movie, it seems like he has a Webley revolver, but in real life, he said it was a Browning automatic. So it was an automatic, semi-automatic Browning pistol, which if you read his testimony in the American inquiry with the Senate, and he's talking to Senator Smith, this is actually ridiculously funny. He asked him, what kind of pistol was it? He's like, it's a Browning automatic. Oh, and I have it in my pocket right now. Fifth Officer Lowe was kind of like that, kind of like a belligerent wisecracker. I thought that was pretty funny. But overall, yeah, those are the main things I want to talk about the movie in Titanic. It was pretty good. I mean, the ship looked pretty solid, and I also really like the fact that it shows some real life underwater footage or some models and special effects from the wreck site. That looked pretty damn good. Now, let's talk about A Night to Remember. Pretty much everything that I said that was positive about Titanic, A Night to Remember had, and more. Bruce Ismay was actually portrayed a lot more charitably in this movie. You actually do see him assisting with the evacuation. However, the irony is the way they showed him boarding the lifeboat, collapsible lifeboat C, not very flattering, actually a little unfair, so that's what Titanic did better than A Night to Remember.
Blow it away.
But be that as it may, the scene where they see the iceberg and the guys in the crow's nest, the lookouts in the crow's nest call the bridge, and Murdoch put it full astern, but he missed. The thing that I really like is a lot of passengers say when the Titanic hit the iceberg, it didn't feel like a great impact. It felt more like a shudder or a shake, kind of like if you hit the brakes on a car. And instead of showing a grandiose, epic thing, the movie shows us tables and glasses and dishes just clattering. I thought that was pretty brilliant, actually. And then not for naught, there are a lot of interesting things in the wireless room, where you see the wireless operators, Harold Bride and Jack Phillips. It fully goes into the detail of how they tried basically until the end to send out messages, distress messages, to get other ships to the area to save the Titanic.
Try sending SOS. That's the new call. And maybe the only chance you'd ever have.
And you also, this was brilliant, by the way. You also see in the movie how initially the passengers did not take this seriously. A lot of them thought, well, this is an inconvenience. Nothing's gonna happen. Why are you putting us into lifeboats? The ship is unsinkable. I don't really want to go. So you see in the initial evacuation that officers and crewmen are struggling to get people, to convince people to go into the lifeboats, and no one's taking it seriously. As the sinking starts to progress and the night goes on, the ship starts to list a little bit more, and that's when the panic starts to set in, because people are like, okay, hang on a second. They've been telling us to get into the boats. We're not really listening, but I'm noticing something going on. They're firing distress rockets, which is true. Once every 5 minutes, a distress rocket was fired. That is seen in the movie.
What a whiz! Y'all snippy.
But as the lifeboats started to run out and get fewer and fewer, that's when people started to panic. And then when there were no more boats left, that's when it was pandemonium, which is so true.
First boats were away on the port side. The first boats away didn't have many passengers on board, and they didn't think she was going to sink. And a few of the first boats on the port side got away with half filled. Well, when we got back up onto the boat deck, we couldn't get near the lifeboats. Some people were scrambling to get in and being pushed back. By that time, she was listing very badly to port.
Well, they weren't launched very quickly, because at first no one thought anything was going to happen. They are going to launch lifeboats, but you'll all be back on board for breakfast. There wasn't any panic until the lifeboats left, and then there was panic galore. We were down on the ocean. We could hear them running about on the decks and screaming. You can imagine people came up from their cabin, went onto the deck, no lifeboat, tearing around the other side. That's when the panic was there. There wasn't any panic at the time I got in a lifeboat because there weren't enough people up there.
And then another thing, let's go back to the wireless operators. There was a scene where right before Phillips and Bride were going to leave the wireless room, there was a crew member who tried to steal their life jacket, and then there was a tussle, and then bam, he knocked him out cold. That actually really did happen in real life. And the fact remains that that's the last time that the two saw each other alive, and unfortunately, Phillips died, but Bride lived. And also it tells the story of Charles Lightoller and how he survived, and how he survived is actually a really incredible story. I urge you to look into it on your own. What ended up happening was there were collapsible lifeboats that were not properly launched from the Titanic, and they got swept away. One such lifeboat, collapsible lifeboat B, got swept away, and there were passengers who were able to climb on top of the boat and stand on it while it was capsized, and luckily, Second Officer Charles Lightoller, who was the highest ranking crew member to survive the Titanic, he climbed onto it. And his story, very incredible night of survival, that's in the movie. I mean, I can go on and on talking about like the little Easter egg things that were in the movie, or maybe nitpick about some things that were taken for creative liberty, but the fact remains this movie is extremely accurate. It is definitely the most accurate Titanic film. There is one thing I haven't mentioned, and I have done that on purpose. The one thing this movie gets really wrong is the ship sinks in one piece. That's the only thing that James Cameron has on A Night to Remember, because it was a part of the official narrative that the Titanic sunk in one piece. And a lot of us now would think, well, that's ridiculous. What makes you say that? Let's look at the facts. So most people on the Titanic died, okay? The people who survived, I mean, because there was like roughly 1,500 people who died, and a little over 700 people survived the Titanic sinking. And there were conflicting accounts as to how the sinking happened, and not everyone agreed that the ship broke apart. That seems to be like the most iconic or most well-known thing about the sinking of the Titanic. Pretty much everyone knows that nowadays, even if you're not a Titanic geek. The fact remains, people disagreed about that. There were crew members like Second Officer Charles Lightoller who swore to his dying day that the ship sunk in one piece, and it was testified in the official inquiries by both British and American officials. A lot of these Titanic survivors said to them, to the official authorities, no, the ship didn't break apart. That's just a rumor. That's a myth. And that was the official narrative for decades. Now, majority of survivors actually did say they saw the ship break apart, but being that the foremost authorities and crew members and officers all said, for the most part, not all, generally speaking, the voices who had the most authority, the most weight or importance, the loudest voices, the most important voices, they were the ones who said the Titanic sunk in one piece. So for decades, it was a very heated debate and a heated discussion, but ultimately the conclusion of the inquiries, both inquirers said the Titanic sunk in one piece. So when Walter Lord was doing research for the film, he was just going off of what was the official story, the official narrative. So I'm not really gonna blame the guy because that was in the official documents and it wasn't proven that the ship broke in half until the 1980s, 1985, when Robert Ballard discovered the wreck. That's when it was proven the Titanic sank and broke apart in the sinking.
I saw that ship sink and I saw that ship break in half. And for so many years, people had argued with me about that. But now at last, it has been proven beyond all doubt that she did break in half. I know she did, I saw her.
Now here's the thing. The Titanic angle at which it sank in the movie A Night to Remember, it's also a little bit off. I mean, the angle was much more pronounced. If you asked a lot of survivors, even Charles Lightoller himself said that when the ship went down, it was sticking out or at the very least close to it. And the movie A Night to Remember, the angle is, it kind of looks like this. I mean, the angle kind of, like, let's just say the bottom frame is the water. It kind of looks like this going down. But that just could be the limitations of special effects.
Slowly, she reared up on end, till at last she was absolutely perpendicular.
But I'm not going to give James Cameron the pass because in his movie, the way he portrays the Titanic breaking is actually not fully accurate. So the angle at which the Titanic breaks in the movie, it's kind of like this, like really, really high. And then the ship splits, causing a huge dramatic wave and blowing apart everything. That's not quite accurate because in real life, the angle at which the Titanic broke, it's still disputed, but it's roughly between like 40 to 20, or 23 to 40 degrees angle. That's kind of what people are thinking. Because, I mean, the ship wasn't designed to stick out in the air like that and eventually the steel separated. But like I said, it's still hotly debated. There are some people who say that the angle was as low as 15 degrees, or some people who say it was 40 degrees. I'm not a mathematician, I'm not an engineer, but that's just what a lot of people say. And also, there's a lot of different breakup theories as to what the ship broke apart, how that looked. So the movie portrays the Titanic breaking between the two funnels, the two steam stacks, like the back one and then the third one, and that's how it broke apart in the movie. But there are some who speculate that the ship actually broke in between, in the middle here, but then as the ship was going down, parts and chunks of the ship broke off and then it was left like this in the water. Or people think that it broke in half clean, and as the ship went down, the stern was going down so quickly and so violently and it was imploding that it just ripped parts of the ship off. That's why at the bottom of the ocean it kind of looks like this. So yeah, the breakup theory isn't 100% confirmed. There's a lot of different speculations, and it's pretty interesting to see when you go onto online videos to see who subscribes to what theory. It's all very interesting. It's kind of cool. But when you listen to the survivors' testimonies on how the ship broke apart, it's still all really fascinating. That's like the one thing that James Cameron can have the leg up on A Night to Remember, is it actually showed the ship breaking apart. Guys, I was rambling on a lot. I'm sorry for that, but thank you for cooperating with me. You guys want to know what is more historically accurate, and there is no question. It is A Night to Remember. So winner, A Night to Remember. All right, guys, now for our final round, we're going to be talking about legacy. Which movie has a better legacy? Legacy and longevity, what's going to live forever? Guys, Titanic was one of the highest grossing movies of all time. I think at one point it was the highest grossing movie of all time. The movie made $2 billion. That's a lot of money. And then it also has the record, well, it's tied, but it's tied with the record of the most Oscars ever won for any movie. It literally has 11 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, like all that good stuff. Like the big Oscars, a lot of them were won by Titanic. And there was a time where the Oscars had a lot of credibility. There was a time where the Oscars were the pinnacle of achievement in film. So the legacy of Titanic is it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It has got 11 Oscars, including Best Picture. It is one of the most iconic movies of all time. It's got one of the most iconic movie quotes of all time. I'm the king of the world.
I'm the king of the world!
I mean, there are references of this movie seen all throughout pop culture, and there's a lot of different Titanic tropes that you see in other movies, and not for naught. I mean, it's become like a meme on the internet. People always say, like, I can't believe he didn't cry during Titanic, and then it's like the guy crying over his dog or something. I don't agree that this is a love movie or a romance movie, but it is seen as one of the most romantic movies of all time, and women love this movie. Women love Titanic, and I don't really know if it has a huge male audience outside of history buffs or people who can casually like it, but I love this movie. It's one of my favorite movies. It has things that appeal to both male and female audiences. It's got the supposed love story and the sinking and then the history part and all these epic special effects, and it's also made by one of the most iconic filmmakers of all time. I mean, tell me that he did not do a good job in portraying the ship. And it was also like a formative role in the earlier stages of Leo DiCap's career. Get off! The legacy of A Night to Remember. I think Night to Remember is going to be remembered by hardcore movie film history buffs or people who are Titanic nerds or historians.
What is it? Iceberg, sir. I put her hard to starboard and reversed the engines, but she was too close.
I guarantee most of your casual movie-going audiences hasn't seen it, which is an unfortunate thing because it's a very good movie. But I guarantee if you say, stop anyone on the street, you ever hear that movie Titanic? Most people would either say, yes, I've heard of it, or yes, I've seen it. You ask random people on the street, you ever see or hear of A Night to Remember? They're probably not going to. So that's the unfortunate thing. The legacy of A Night to Remember, it's largely forgotten. So unquestionably, this round goes to Titanic. Winner. Titanic. Well, guys, we are at a stalemate. We are at a standstill. It is the Western Front trench warfare. We don't know who's winning because it's a deadlock. Guys, I'm like the Electoral College. It's not the number of rounds that wins. It's the quality of rounds, and I get to choose who wins in the end. So you want to know the results.
You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
Guys, the winner of this is A Night to Remember. Guys, the reason why A Night to Remember wins this is because someone who has dedicated their whole life to history, thanks to the sinking of the Titanic, can appreciate the history that is portrayed in this film. Not only is it brilliant from a technical point of view, like the direction, the special effects were really good for the time and hold up very well. I just love the acting, I love the performances, and I love how well it portrays the movie, and I love how well it transitions from the book to screen. Not only that, it's a charming, endearing movie. It pulls at my heartstrings much more than Titanic does. I said this in my A Night to Remember review, that I actually am much more emotionally attached to the characters in this movie than I am from the Titanic movie with James Cameron, or of James Cameron. Like, I feel bad. I actually feel the sense of tragedy much more in A Night to Remember.
In any case, we can't get everyone in the boats.
I know that, sir. Please God, it won't come to that.
And then not for naught, I don't have to contend, or the movie doesn't have to compete with a phony romance that's not even romantic, that I don't care about. And I don't have to stomach fictional characters in order to get to the thing I want to see the most.
Gentlemen, we are in a precarious position. We must be prepared to abandon ship.
Because A Night to Remember it jumps right into what we're here for. It doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't keep you waiting. It gets right into the voyage, right into the sinking. Whereas in Titanic, I mean, it's a long movie. The runtime of the movie is pretty much how long it took to sink the ship. It's not to say that the ship sinks in real time, but what it is to say, the first half of the movie is the love romance that I don't really care about. And then when the sinking goes down, after that, there's still residual lovey stuff that I don't care about. And again, Titanic is just, it's flawed characters in a historical tragedy, whereas in A Night to Remember is a historical tragedy where if you want to learn something about the Titanic but be entertained, feel the drama, feel the emotion, feel the weight and the impending doom and the tragedy of recognizing that these are people and they're going to die, you don't want to watch a documentary and you want to be entertained, watch this movie. Honestly, I can't really say much more on that. That's how it is. That's the way it is. That's the way it's gonna be. And that is why A Night to Remember is the best Titanic movie. Unfortunately, not many people know about it. So, guys, now you know. I want to thank you guys if you watched until the end. If you came this far, thank you so much. But if you came this far, maybe you're willing to go a little bit further. How about you watch my A Night to Remember review? Give that a shot. Or you can watch my Titanic is Not a Love Story review. I would very much appreciate that. If you can watch either one of those, that would be so amazing. If you made it this far, please hit that like, please hit that subscribe. Guys, it costs you nothing to do so. It's totally free. One like can go a long way, and it really, really helps me out. Also, guys, please follow me on Instagram. That's going to be linked in the description below. I'm trying to boost my subscriber account. I'm trying to boost my follower account, and I can't do it without you guys. You guys mean so much to me, and truly, thank you for watching. And like I said, if you've gone this far, why don't you do me a solid and, oh, what's that? That's Titanic's Not a Love Story. Why don't you watch that right now? And I'll see you in the next Unpopular Opinion.